With only hours left before his execution, his final request wasn't for a last meal or a phone call. It was to see his dog one last time. But what happened next would silence the prison, freeze the guards, and unravel a truth buried for years. That morning, the air inside the penitentiary felt different, as if the concrete walls themselves were holding their breath. Every sound, the rattle of cell doors, the shuffle of boots on polished floors, the distant hum of fluorescent lights, seemed amplified, echoing through corridors that had witnessed countless final days. But this one felt different. This one carried a tension that even the most seasoned guards couldn't shake. In cell block D, Rowan Fletcher sat motionless on the edge of his narrow bunk, shoulders slumped, hands resting loosely on his knees, eyes trained on the scarred concrete floor. He wasn't the same man who had entered this place 7 years ago. Prison had hollowed him out, carving deep shadows beneath his eyes and etching lines of quiet surrender across his face. The anger that once burned in his gaze had long since dimmed, replaced by something quieter. Resignation, maybe. Or just exhaustion. The guards expected the familiar routine. A medium-rare steak, perhaps. A phone call to a distant relative. Maybe a cigarette, a Bible verse, or a handwritten goodbye to someone who'd stopped writing back years ago. But when Warden Lowell entered, clipboard in hand, and asked the question he'd asked dozens of condemned men before, Rowan's answer came quiet but certain. "I want to see Sable. My dog." A silence. Officers near the door exchanged glances. One shifted his weight. Another's eyebrow lifted slightly. A man hours from death, choosing an animal over human contact. It was unheard of. Unprecedented. Some might even call it strange. But for Rowan, Sable wasn't just a pet. He was the last thread connecting him to the man he'd been before the arrest, before the trial, before the verdict that shattered his world. In his final hours, Rowan didn't want platitudes from prison chaplains or strained conversations with people who'd already written him off. He just wanted to look into the eyes that had never doubted him. The only soul who'd never asked if he was guilty. Warden Lowell leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming slowly against the armrest. In 23 years of running this facility, he'd heard his share of unusual last requests. A harmonica. A specific brand of root beer. Once, a man had asked for his ex-wife's forgiveness. She never came. But bringing a dog into maximum security on execution day? Into a controlled environment designed for absolute order? Never. In the control room minutes later, officers gathered around the monitor, voices low but firm. "It's a liability," one said, arms crossed. "We've never allowed an animal inside these walls, let alone on a day like this." What's next? Exotic pets? Therapy peacocks? But Officer Valencia, who'd been standing quietly near the back, stepped forward. Her voice was steady, measured. "Sable is all he has left," she said. "No family visits. No letters. No one's come to see him in 3 years." She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. Maybe we should let the man have some peace in his final hours. The room fell quiet. Warden Lowell pulled Rowan's file. Clean record. No incidents. No violations. And there, in the personal effects section, German Shepherd, Name, Sable. Age, 8 years. Seized at time of arrest. After a long moment, Warden Lowell gave a single nod. 10 minutes. Supervised. Yard only. The intercom crackled at 7:58 a.m. Fletcher. Warden's office. Move. Rowan rose slowly, bones creaking like old fence wire. 2 guards flanked him, hands hovering near tasers out of habit more than need. He'd never given anyone trouble. Not once. They walked the Green Mile in reverse, past the rows of cells where men suddenly found their shoes fascinating, past the phones that never rang for him, past the visitation room that had stayed empty for 3 straight years. Warden Lowell was waiting behind his desk, tie already loosened though the day had barely started. He looked like a man who hadn't slept either. "You know why I'm here," Lowell said. "Not a question." Rowan nodded. "State your request for the record." Rowan's voice came out rough, amused. "I want to see my dog. Sable. 10 minutes. That's all." Lowell didn't blink. He'd read the file. He knew what the dog meant. Still, protocol was protocol. "You understand we've never done this." "I do." "You understand it's a security risk." "I'm not asking for a weapon, sir. I'm asking for 10 minutes with the only living thing that never stopped believing I was innocent." Something flickered across Lowell's face, too fast to name, gone just as quick. He picked up the phone. "Valencia. Bring me the kennel paperwork on the Fletcher seizure." "Yeah, the German Shepherd. I know it's been 7 years. Just do it." He hung up and looked at Rowan like he was seeing him for the first time. Clean record. 0 incidents. Not even a goddamn write-up for loud coughing. A pause. "If that dog so much as shows a tooth at my staff, it ends. You understand?" Rowan swallowed. "He won't." Lowell stared a beat longer, then scribbled something on a yellow form. 10 minutes. Yard. Full supervision. 4 p.m. That's the best you're getting. Rowan felt something crack open in his chest, small, fragile, dangerous. Hope. He hadn't felt it in so long he almost didn't recognize it. "Thank you," he whispered. Lowell waved him out without another word. Back in his cell, Rowan sat on the bunk and stared at the wall. 10 minutes. 10 minutes with the only creature on earth who still knew who he really was. He closed his eyes and tried to picture Sable's face. He couldn't quite do it anymore. 7 years was a long time to hold a memory without a photograph. But Sable would remember. Dogs always remember. Word traveled faster than policy in a place like this. By 9:30 a.m., half the block knew Fletcher had asked for his dog instead of a steak. By 10:15, the other half knew the warden had actually said yes. In the staff break room, the debate raged like a pay-per-view fight. "This is bullshit," Officer Strickland spat, slamming his coffee down hard enough to slosh it over the rim. "We're bringing a fucking animal into a max facility on execution day. What's next? Circus elephants for the lifers." Strickland was a big man, thick neck, thick ego, thick file of complaints no one ever seemed to do anything about. He'd been on the job 16 years and acted like he owned the corridors. Officer Valencia didn't look up from her paperwork. Maybe some of us still remember what humanity looks like, Strick. He snorted. Humanity don't mean shit when that dog decides to take a chunk out of somebody. Sable's a retired K9, Valencia said calmly. Trained better than half the rookies we hire. And Rowan Fletcher hasn't had a single violent incident in 7 years. You scared of a leash and a muzzle? Strickland's jaw worked. Something dark flashed behind his eyes. I'm not scared of anything, he muttered. Just saying it's a stupid risk for a dead man walking. Valencia finally looked up. Maybe that's the point. Let the man die with something that isn't stupid. Strickland drained his coffee, crushed the styrofoam cup in one fist, and left without another word. Valencia watched him go. She didn't like the way he'd said, dead man walking. Almost like he needed it to stay that way. 4 p.m. crept closer like a storm front. In the yard, guards set up a 20 by 20 square of chain-link portable fencing, temporary, ugly, effective. 2 armed posts on the corners. Strickland volunteered for one of them. Valencia took the other without being asked. At 3:47 p.m., a battered white van pulled up to the Sally Port. A county animal control officer stepped out, leash in hand. And there was Sable. Older. Gray muzzle. Slight hitch in his back left leg from the old cruciate injury Rowan had saved up 6 months to fix. But the eyes, Jesus, the eyes, were exactly the same. Deep brown. Steady. Ancient in their understanding. The officer handed the leash to Valencia. He hasn't eaten since yesterday, she said quietly. Just kept looking at the gate like he knew. Valencia took the leash. Felt the weight of it. Sable's tail gave one slow, uncertain wag. Then the yard gate rolled open. And everything changed. The control room smelled of burnt coffee and old sweat. Half a dozen uniforms crowded around the monitor bank, watching the empty yard like it might bite them. Negative, Captain Hargrove barked. We do not import animals into a death house. Period. End of discussion. Strickland leaned against the wall, arms folded so tight his knuckles blanched. Damn right. 1 bite risk and we're all filling out paperwork until Christmas. Officer Henderson, gray at the temples and soft around the middle, spoke without looking up from his crossword. Sable's retired K9. Better manners than most of you. Doesn't matter, Hargrove snapped. Protocol says no. Valencia's voice cut through clean and calm. Protocol also says the condemned gets a reasonable last request. Steak, cigarette, phone call, reasonable. 10 minutes with the only thing that never abandoned him. That's more than reasonable. That's mercy. Silence rippled outward. Hargrove opened his mouth, closed it again. Warden Lowell stood in the doorway, tie finally off, sleeves rolled. Nobody had heard him come in. He dropped Rowan's file on the console. It landed with a flat, heavy sound. 7 years, he said. 0 incidents. 0. Not a dirty look, not a raised voice, not a single fucking contraband toothpick. He tapped the folder. This man has been a ghost. And today he asks for 10 minutes with his dog. Strickland started to speak. Lowell lifted one finger and the room froze. "I'm not asking for opinions," Lowell said. "I'm telling you what's happening. 10 minutes. Portable fencing. 4 armed posts. Muzzle stays on the dog, restraints stay on Fletcher. Anybody doesn't like it can take the rest of the day off without pay." He looked around. Nobody moved. Good. He turned to Valencia. "You'll handle the dog?" "Yes, sir." Lowell gave one curt nod and walked out. By the time the shift change hit at 2, every tier knew. Inmates passed the word in whispers that carried farther than shouts. "Fletcher's getting his dog. 10 minutes. Dead man walking just bought himself a miracle." Down in cell block D, Rowan sat on his bunk, hands on his knees, feeling the concrete tremble with distant voices the way it sometimes did before a storm. He didn't know what was coming. He only knew the clock had started moving in the right direction for the first time in 7 years. The yard gate rolled back with a metallic scream that cut straight through the afternoon heat. Rowan stood in the center of the makeshift pen, wrists cuffed in front, orange jumpsuit bleached almost white by too many institutional washings. The sun hit him like a slap after 7 years of fluorescent gloom. He blinked, squinted, and then forgot how to breathe. Sable stepped through the gate. Older. Christ, so much older. The black saddle across his back had faded to charcoal, the tan points gone soft and gray. His muzzle was nearly silver now, and he favored the left rear leg with a careful hitch that made Rowan's throat close. But the eyes, those deep amber eyes, were exactly the same. They locked on Rowan like they'd never left. Valencia unclipped the leash. Sable didn't walk. He launched. 40 feet of concrete disappeared under frantic paws. He hit Rowan square in the chest with the full weight of 90 pounds of muscle and memory, nearly knocking him backward. Rowan dropped to his knees, chains rattling, arms wrapping tight around the dog's neck as Sable whined high and desperate, a sound Rowan had never heard from him before, not once in all their years together. Hot breath against his neck. Wet nose buried in his throat. The frantic thump of a tail against his ribs. Rowan pressed his face into the coarse fur behind Sable's ears and inhaled, gun oil and pine needles and the ghost of home. Tears came without permission, soaking into the graying rough. Sable licked them away like they were the only thing that mattered in the world. For one impossible minute, the prison vanished. No walls. No guards. No clocks ticking down to 6 o'clock. Just the two of them, the way it used to be, before sirens, before accusations, before the night everything broke. Rowan's fingers found the old scar on Sable's shoulder, the one from barbed wire when he was barely a year old. He traced it like reading Braille, proof that time had passed, proof that they'd both survived it. "I got you, boy," he whispered, voice cracking raw. "I got you." Sable answered with a low, trembling woof, pressed closer, as if he could crawl inside Rowan's skin and never leave again. Somewhere beyond the fence, boots shifted on gravel. Rifles adjusted. Someone cleared their throat. But inside the pen, time stopped. And for the first time in 7 years, Rowan Fletcher felt human. The moment shattered like dropped glass. 1 second Sable was trembling joy against Rowan's chest, the next he went statue still. Every muscle locked. The happy whine died in his throat and became something older, darker. The tail that had been beating Rowan's ribs stopped mid-swing, stiff as a blade. A low growl rolled out of him, so deep it vibrated through Rowan's knees into the concrete. Rowan felt it before he heard it. He pulled back just enough to see Sable's ears pinned flat, lips peeling from teeth that suddenly looked a lot sharper than retirement age should allow. 10 feet away, just outside the fencing, stood Officer Strickland. He'd been lounging against a post, thumbs hooked in his belt, smirk half-formed like he was enjoying the show. Now the smirk faltered. His hand drifted toward the taser on his hip. Sable's growl climbed, guttural, continuous. Hackles rose in a black ridge from neck to tail. He shifted his weight forward, planting himself between Rowan and the guard, legs splayed, head lowered. "Fletcher, control your goddamn dog," Strickland barked, voice cracking just enough to betray him. Rowan slid his cuffed hands along Sable's back, feeling the tremor of pure rage under the fur. "Easy, boy. It's okay." But it wasn't. Rowan knew that sound. Sable had given it once to a drunk who'd kicked in their gate at 3 a.m., once to a coyote that got too close to the porch. Never to a person who didn't deserve it. Never. The yard went quiet enough to hear gravel shift under boots. Valencia took one step closer, hand raised, eyes flicking between dog and guard. Henderson's shotgun came up an inch. Strickland's face had gone blotchy red, sweat beading at his hairline even in the shade. Sable took one deliberate step forward, chains on Rowan's wrists clinking as he tightened his grip on the scruff. The growl never wavered. It was a promise. Something about this man was setting Sable off. And Rowan, for the first time in 7 years, felt the old instinct stir, sharp and cold and awake. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Valencia stepped inside the pen slow, palms open, voice low like she was talking to a spooked horse. "Easy, Sable. Good boy. Easy." Sable's ears flicked toward her but his eyes stayed riveted on Strickland, the growl simmering, never breaking. Valencia crouched beside Rowan, close enough that he smelled the mint gum on her breath. "That's not a random trigger," she murmured. "That's recognition." "What the hell does your dog know about Strickland?" Rowan's heart started punching his ribs. He kept his hand buried in Sable's ruff, anchoring them both. "Sable doesn't lie," he said, voice rough. "Never has." Valencia's gaze sharpened. She glanced over her shoulder to make sure Strickland was still outside the fence, then dropped her voice to a thread. "He was on duty the night you got arrested, Rowan. Local PD logs show him clocked in, same sector, same hours. But his name never appeared in your arrest report. Not once. Not even as responding officer." The words hit like ice water poured straight down his spine. Strickland. At the house. Before the uniforms. Before the lights and the shouting and the cuffs. Rowan's pulse roared in his ears. He stared at Valencia, afraid to blink, afraid the moment would vanish if he breathed wrong. Across the yard, the far gate screeched. Strickland sauntered back into view, coffee in one hand, swagger back in place like he owned the concrete. Sable's growl snapped into something feral, teeth flashing white, body vibrating so hard Rowan felt it in his bones. Valencia stood slowly. "Strickland, step back," she called, sharp enough that two other guards turned. Up on the catwalk, Warden Lowell's voice cracked over the intercom, cold and furious. "What the hell is going on down there?" Valencia locked eyes with Rowan for one burning second. This wasn't just a goodbye anymore. It was the beginning of something else. The interview room smelled of bleach and old fear. Rowan sat chained to the table, Sable pressed tight against his leg like a loaded gun with the safety off. The dog's eyes never left Strickland from the second he walked in. Warden Lowell didn't sit. He stood behind the chair, arms folded, voice flat as a blade. "Explain to me, Officer Strickland, why your name is nowhere in the original arrest report when you were on duty that night, same grid, same time window." Strickland shrugged, too casual. "I was off duty, sir. Clocked out early. Just happened to be driving by the neighborhood. Saw the lights, kept going. Didn't think it mattered." Sable barked once, sharp, explosive, furious. The sound ricocheted off cinderblock like a gunshot. Strickland flinched so hard his chair scraped backward. Rowan felt the shift in the room like a cold wind. Valencia slid a single photograph across the table, grainy security still from a neighbor's porch cam, timestamp 21:47, 12 minutes before the first 911 call. A man in plain clothes, build matching Strickland's, walking fast down Rowan's driveway, bald cap pulled low, something dark in his right hand. Valencia's voice was soft steel. "Neighbor just came forward this morning. Says he always thought the guy looked like a cop but figured he was part of the response team. Took him 7 years and seeing your face on the news last week to realize you never showed up on any paperwork." Strickland's throat worked. Sweat beaded at his temples. Lowell leaned in until his shadow swallowed the table. "You're relieved of duty effective now. Turn in your badge and weapon." Strickland opened his mouth. No sound came out. Sable growled again, low and final, the sound of a verdict. The power in the room had moved. It wasn't in the warden's hands anymore. It was in the dog's throat and the photograph burning a hole in the table. And for the first time in 7 years, it belonged to Rowan Fletcher. The words came out of Lowell's mouth like a prison gate slamming open. "Execution postponed indefinitely. Case reopened. Fletcher, you're staying right here until we sort this shit out." Rowan heard them, but they didn't land until Sable leaned hard against his leg and whined, confused by the sudden absence of dread in the room. Only then did the air rush back into Rowan's lungs, so fast it hurt. Everything after that happened at triple speed. Lab techs flew in from the state capitol before sunset. Old evidence bags cracked open under new lights. Prints lifted from the murder weapon, prints that had somehow been inconclusive in 2017, now glowed unmistakable under the new software. 10 perfect points. Strickland, Gregory Allen. Not Rowan Fletcher. By midnight the neighbor's porch cam footage had been enhanced, sharpened, zoomed. Strickland's face, clear as day, walking out of Rowan's house with the gun tucked in his waistband. By 2 a.m. they found the throwdown knife in Strickland's garage, still flecked with the victim's blood after all these years. By 3 a.m. they had his old partner, retired and drunk in a trailer in Reno, crying on the phone, confessing how Strickland made him sign off on the clean scene. By dawn, the district attorney himself stood in the warden's office, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight, and read the statement into a recorder. All charges against Rowan Joseph Fletcher are hereby dismissed with prejudice. Immediate release ordered. Strickland was cuffed in the same bullpen where Rowan had once been processed. Same cold bench. Same flickering fluorescent light. Only this time the big man was crying, snot running down his lip, begging for a deal that wasn't coming. Rowan watched it all through the observation glass, Sable sitting beside him, tail thumping once every time Strickland's voice cracked. 7 years stolen. Returned in 7 hours. When the DA finished, he turned to Rowan and tried to say something that sounded like sorry. Rowan didn't hear it. He was already looking at the clock. It wasn't ticking toward death anymore. It was ticking toward morning. The gates opened at 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday that smelled like cut grass and hot iron. Rowan stood in the sally port wearing the same jeans and flannel shirt they'd taken off him 7 years ago, now comically large on a body that had lived on rage and oatmeal. No cuffs. No escort. Just a thin manila envelope with his name on it and a dog waiting on the other side. Sable saw him first. The shepherd cleared the visitor parking lot in 4 bounding strides, leash trailing behind him like an afterthought, and slammed into Rowan so hard they both went down in the dust. Rowan laughed, an actual laugh, rusty and shocked out of him, while Sable whined and licked and tried to fit 10,000 missed days into one frantic minute. Rowan buried his face in warm fur and let the tears come, no longer caring who saw. "We made it, boy," he rasped against Sable's neck. "We fucking made it." When he finally stood, the sky was ridiculous. Too big. Too blue. It hurt to look at directly, like staring into the sun after years in a basement. He took one step past the shadow of the wall. Then another. Gravel crunched under boots that belonged to him now. No chains. No count time. No officer barking movement. Just open road and wind and the steady press of Sable's shoulder against his leg, guiding him forward the way he always had. Rowan stopped in the middle of the road, tilted his head back, and breathed until his ribs shook. The air tasted like pine and diesel and freedom, and it burned going down. He wasn't the man they dragged in here screaming innocence anymore. He wasn't the ghost who'd learned to fold himself small so the hours would pass. He was the man Sable had waited for. The man Sable had never stopped believing in. He scratched behind those gray ears one more time, felt the strong heart thumping against his palm, and started walking. Toward morning. Toward everything. Together. This story reminds us that love doesn't need words. That loyalty doesn't care about courtrooms or time. Sometimes the truth doesn't come from a witness stand. It comes from a dog who remembers. Now tell me in the comments. Has an animal ever proven they knew the truth when no one else did? Drop your story below, I read every single one. If this one hit you in the chest, hit that subscribe button. More stories that refuse to let you breathe easy are already on the way.